Hey, what's going on, good people? Welcome to Russ Can Fly. Well, not really. Boo! Okay, so if you look behind me, and if you look over here, behind me here, and I want to turn the camera around. If you look into the sky, all around here, that is called no go. So no flying today. So yes, I came out to the airport to do some flying. You can see all the airplanes for Leading Edge Aviation Incorporated are parked on the tarmac, and there's absolutely nothing going on. And so unless I was IFR rated, which I am not able to fly today, and that is a total bummer. And so that's the nature of aviation. Sometimes you come out and the weather just doesn't cooperate. So I thought, since I was here, I'm going to show you where I was going to go, but I thought it would be fun to at this point take a pause in some of the flying. And I know I've been doing all of these upload Wednesdays and all that kind of stuff, but rather than do any of that for the upload Friday, usually my flight videos, well, this flight video is going to be about where have I flown? What airports have I gone to? And I was going to go somewhere different today, but unfortunately I'm just not able to do so. And let's pull out the sectional and let's look at where I was going to go today, but let's see, where have I gone? What airports have I gone to? My goal is to basically hit almost every airport in my area. And since I have to build some time before I start my IFR training, it's a lot of fun to do that. Okay, so as luck would have it, the rain kind of slowed down as I went back into the FBO. And of course, I was in there running my mouth with some people, ran into some awesome folks. The one thing I love about aviation, you know, it's like you go in somewhere and there's other pilots, there's definitely going to be war stories, especially if people aren't able to fly. But one of the things that's kind of interesting too is, if you can see here, the weather has improved a little bit, and you actually see somebody who's actually coming in for a landing now. But see, I don't want to be flying and have to try to figure out how to pick my way through that kind of stuff. So still a non-fly day for me, and I want to be safe. All right, so hopefully this is coming through. But my mission today, I was going to fly out of Doylestown, and I was going to fly into Warwick Municipal Airport, N72. But as you can see this green is kind of showing up on the map here, the sectional. That is shower activity, and so that's the issue. So I might be fine down in here, but you know, as I get up here, I might be running the showers and clouds and all kinds of stuff, and of course that would be problematic. So I scrapped that, but that's what I was going to do to add to my sectional. But where else have I been? Well, that's the subject of this video, so let's take a look. Okay, just wanted to start from here. So of course I've been to Wings because this is my home field, and this is where I did a lot of my flight training and all of that kind of thing. And of course, and it's interesting, I don't have it marked on here too boldly, but I actually have Doylestown marked too. So of course I've flown in between Doylestown and Wings a bunch, and after I got my PPL, I now fly out of Doylestown pretty significantly, just because I have access to more cost-effective rental aircraft. So definitely those two started my journey. So one of the first airports that I flew into that has a control tower or a class Delta was Northeast Philadelphia Airport, or Papa November Echo. You've seen several of my videos where I've flown into Northeast Philly Airport and I've done touch and goes and stuff. But this is where I get good with, you know, kind of talking the tower and that kind of thing. Plus, this is where I did my first discovery flight where I freaked out, and I didn't even think to film that or whatever, and good thing I didn't, because you would have seen me being a complete nut. And it's a good thing I didn't film any of that Discovery flight stuff, because you would have seen me. I looked like a complete nut during that time. But I actually ended up doing 2 Discovery flights, and I've talked about that in a video previously. My first Discovery flight was out of Northeast Philadelphia Airport, and I just completely freaked out. But then I did a subsequent Discovery flight out at Wings, and that's where I ended up taking my flight training. Okay, so in addition to flying to Northeast Philadelphia Airport as a Class Delta, I also flew into Morristown Airport as well. And this is the airport that I flew and did my first cross-country solo to this airport. And it's interesting, I did my first cross-country solo, and if you look, I have a video where I talk about doing my first flight as a licensed pilot. This is the airport that I flew to. And so I like Morristown because it can get busy, because you're close to Newark Airport here, but the people in the tower were always pretty cool. And I definitely want to add that the one time when I did my first cross-country solo into Morristown, they were really cool because I basically said that I was a student pilot. And so all of the radio comms that they did with me that day, because I was super nervous, freaking out, I'm actually flying to an airport by myself for the first time. They were super chill about how they delivered the instructions for getting into the airport. I also had some issues because I was landing on a runway that I hadn't landed on before, and I think I was doing a right traffic pattern as opposed to left, which is what I was used to. And they were pretty cool. They understood and they could hear that I was a little nervous and a little excited, so they were great about that. So Morristown Municipal Airport will always be one of my favorite Class Deltas, just because they loom large in my flight history in terms of my first cross-country solo, and they were definitely just very cool with how they treated me that day. Okay, so you got Northeast Philadelphia Airport, you got Morristown. Now some of the other airports that I've flown into is up here, Pocono County Airport. That's when I flew into the Pocono Mountains. That was a trip because this was my first flight into the Pocono Mountains, and that was the first time I went up to 6,500 feet in elevation, because one of the things I had to be mindful of is the TPA, or the traffic pattern altitude, for that airport was 3,000 feet, and I gotta tell you, that was the highest I'd ever flown. The other thing that was a really trip is I had flown over mountains before, but not like that. And the winds were really squirrely and all that kind of stuff. So the Pocono Mountain Municipal Airport, that was the first time where I really got to feel what it was like to fly in the mountains and to be in higher elevation in terms of traffic pattern altitude and that kind of stuff. So definitely a favorite flight of mine in terms of in the mountains. Now the hardest Class Delta with a control tower that I flew into was Reading Regional Airport. It was just something about how I had to come over, like there's like a, it's just like a little town here, and it's like a ridge, and I got really thrown off here. And I will say this one is the one I had the most issues with flying into. Every time I flew into Reading, I always had some problems. The other thing is, a lot of times Reading was another part of my cross-country leg. So basically what would happen is I would fly out of Wings, fly from Wings to Morristown, down to Reading, and the thing is, by the time I flew from here to here, my batteries would die. So thankfully you didn't see me struggle with my issues, but me and Reading, I am triggered. And I think with Reading now, since it's like the 2 or 3 experiences I've had were, difficult experiences, I never fly into Reading by myself. So one of these days I'm gonna have to go back to Reading just so I can like shake that off of me. But that was an airport that I flew into that I've always had some issues with. And last but not least, as it relates to Class Delta airports with a tower, Lancaster. I love flying into Lancaster, and in fact, one of my favorite flights is when I took my wife out to lunch for our first flight, and her first flight together. Lancaster will always be one of those airports that will always be near and dear to my heart, because that's the first time I flew into a Class Delta, and that was the first time I flew with my wife. And of course, you know, that'll be a memory that'll stay with me forever. So, and if you haven't seen that video, me flying with wifey for the first time, I'll post that video up top. You'll see it flash on the screen, flying with wifey, if you want to check that one out. But yeah, love flying into Lancaster, and they're super cool, super chill, and I've never had any issues. Now, I absolutely have to talk about this airport. This is DEC. You've heard me talk about DEC so many times. So from Doylestown to DEC, that's one of my favorite cross countries flights, because it's pretty basic, but DEC is just so hard to find. Every time I fly to this daggone airport, I have a problem finding it. DEC! But no, seriously, DEC is one of those airports that, you know, it will always be part of my flight training, and I'll never, you know, I'll never forget DEC. DEC is just like, yeah, you think you're gonna be able to find me? It's almost like it wants to move or something, like, you know, like, he thinks he's got this place where he can use this dead reckoning for this point or whatever, but I'm gonna shift to over here. So it's just crazy. But DEC is definitely one of those airports that, you know, you know, it's part of my training. It's just part of my pilot and command training for cross country, to build that time. DEC is definitely looms large in my training. So, you know, never gonna be mad at DEC. Okay, I'm gonna go quickly through a couple southern airports that unfortunately aren't on the sectional. But so if you would be thinking about like where I'll be flying, I think like down around here, Woodbine Airport, that's where I got to fly some t-shirts down to my brother from the Black Pilots of America, Roscoe Draper chapter. This is kind of like his home airport. So Rick Sr., I got to fly down here. So I've only flown into Woodbine once, but that airport is like really awesome. I mean, it's like small, but the runways are big and forgiving and like awesome. So Rick Sr., hats off to Woodbine, but I got to come back when I have more time. Problem with renting, you know, you got only but so much time, so we were really rushed. But I definitely want to go back to Woodbine, see my brother Rick Sr., and spend some more time. Maybe we even fly and he can show me some of this, because he's the man, you know. And all these people I know, they're like, you know, pilots, you know what I mean? So, but yeah, Woodbine. And then there's another one down there that I flew to that was awesome, and I actually flew with somebody else. And again, this one is going to be off, and it's not that close to Woodbine, but I'm just showing you it's off the sectional. So, but this is when I flew down to Cape May. Cape May Airport, or Wildwood, New Jersey, but the airfield is actually called Cape May. Awesome. And I'm also going to put that video up. You'll see that video. But that was the time where I flew with my first passenger. So my brother Derek, we flew together, and we flew down to Cape May. Awesome flight. But that was the first time I had been down there. And if you go to that video, you'll see it was just an awesome flight, and some of the views spectacular. Flying over the bay, seeing the ocean, oh, it was awesome. So Cape May Airport is definitely an airport that I am going to repeat. That is an airport that I definitely want to fly other people to, just because I'm sure that a lot of people who will be flying with me have never flown in small general aviation aircraft, number one. But number two, they'll probably never have that view of the ocean the way you have when you fly in a small airplane down there. So definitely Cape May Airport is definitely one of my favorite flights, and I'm definitely going to be repeating that. And I will say that if you fly with me for the first time, request that flight, and weather permitting, that's where we're going to be flying. All right, back to the sectional. Got a few more, and we're going to call this a wrap. Okay, so two of the most challenging flights I've ever done. and where I landed. So again, starting from Doylestown all the way up here to Bradford County. Now Bradford County, this was very, very, very challenging. What made flying into Bradford County so challenging is two things. One, that was the flight where I basically flew into and out of a valley for the first time. And the winds were basically just being funneled through this valley. So when you got to the airport, it was just this crazy, crazy wind. And so when I landed, and I'll post most of those videos, you'll see those pop up as well. But that tricky flight out of the valley, but the landing, I mean, you know, I was working hard. And that was after flying for an hour and a half or two. So I was already a little tired. Then to have to fight the winds on the back end was kind of crazy. But the second thing that made it really challenging was that was my first fuel stop. If you remember, that was the first time I flew to an airport where I had to get fuel. And this gentleman was just awesome in helping me get the fuel. So that was a great experience. And as you can see, flying to these airports are more than just about flying to the airports. It's about these experiences and stories that I'm able to tell as I fly into these different airports. Now, the real challenging is St. Mary's Municipal. That was a crazy flight. And depending on when this video comes out, I don't know if I've posted that flight or not yet, but you'll see that coming. But St. Mary's is also tied to Penn Valley, because if you do remember, I did have an actual emergency landing here at Penn Valley Airport. Now, I had flown here before with my CFI, but I actually ended up being here again because I was flying to St. Mary's and didn't make it and had to make the emergency landing. And again, St. Mary's and Penn Valley will always stand for the experience of emergency landing, understanding my emergency procedures, making sure that that stuff is tight. And again, those videos should be popping up. But if you want to see that flight to Penn Valley, look for the emergency landing video, and the St. Mary's video should be coming out. And last but certainly not least, Lincoln Park. Ho, 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 ho. Lincoln Park. Yo. Okay, so Lincoln Park, the reason why I saved that for last, and hopefully I didn't miss any. I think I got them all. I may have missed a couple, but who knows? But those are the ones that kind of stick out to me anyway, because they got stories behind them. But Lincoln Park, man, what a crazy little airport. But Lincoln Park by far was the most challenging piloting I've ever done. Now, yes, the emergency landing, that was special. But this was, everything was fine. The plane was fine. I was fine. All my equipment was fine. But the terrain and the field configuration is what presented the challenges. And I got to tell you, trying to reach Essex County on the radio, everybody was saying Caldwell Tower. I wasn't realizing that that was what was happening. I then had to change my flight path so that I didn't go into that class Delta without establishing two-way communications with the tower. And so because I had to change my flight path, then that put me on a different trajectory into the field. And that was exacerbated by the topography in the area. But also I tried to do runway 19 as opposed to runway 1. They weren't having it, and they were like, we're using runway 1. So my workaround didn't work. And then the displaced threshold and the smallness of the runway, the narrowness, the shortness, man, it was absolutely nuts. With that, I'm good. I'm done. That's it. I'm flying and loving life. And I just pray that all of you guys are well and your families are well, and that this video finds you and your families in good health and spirits. All right, Russ Kid, Russ can fly. I'm out. See ya.